3 weeks in the ICU. She visited twice. My best friend visited never. Then a nurse mentioned seeing them together in the parking lot, kissing before she came up. I pretended to sleep during her next visit, listened to her lie, recorded everything. Divorce papers were ready before my discharge. The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed hummed with the persistence of a mosquito you can't quite swat. Funny how you notice things like that when you're flat on your back with nothing but time and morphine drip to keep you company. The accident, some drunk idiot ran a red light and turned my pickup truck into modern art, had deposited me here in intensive care with injuries that required 3 weeks of monitoring, consciousness fluctuating between awareness and the mercy of medically induced distance from pain. My name is Robert Mercer, and I own Mercer's Auto Body on the east side of town. 43 years old, married to Diane for 15 years, best friends with Scott Thornton since high school. At least, that's what I thought 3 weeks ago. Amazing how quickly your entire worldview can shift when you're stuck in a hospital bed with nothing but visiting hours to measure your worth to the people you love. Her visits numbered exactly 2 across 21 days of hospitalization. Brief appearances that the nurses noted with the quiet judgment of professionals who observe family dynamics through medical emergencies. I could see it in their eyes, that particular look healthcare workers get when they witness something that doesn't quite add up. Patricia Vance, my day nurse, had perfected that expression. "Your wife seems very busy," Patricia mentioned on day 16, adjusting my IV with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen it all. She was in her 30s, sharp-eyed, with the no-nonsense attitude that comes from dealing with human nature at its most vulnerable. "She's an attorney," I replied, my voice still rough from the breathing tube they'd removed a week earlier. "Ashworth, Brennan and Associates, corporate law, always has cases running." Patricia nodded, but something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Must be demanding work." What really ate at me wasn't just Diane's absence. It was Scott's complete disappearance. My best friend, the man I expected to find beside my bed during vulnerable hours, never materialized despite messages sent and calls attempted and visiting hours that remained consistently empty. We'd been through everything together: high school football, college parties, my wedding, his divorce, late nights at Murphy's Tavern arguing about the Lions' chances and whether the auto industry would ever recover in our little corner of Michigan. Scott worked in corporate sales for Mitchell Industries, one of those guys who could sell ice to Eskimos and made it look effortless. Smooth talker, expensive suits, drove a BMW that he babied like it was his firstborn. We'd been friends for 25 years, and in all that time, he'd never let me down. Until now. "Has anyone else been asking about me?" I asked Patricia during one of her routine checks. "Your shop crew calls every day," she said, checking my chart. "That fellow Tony seems particularly worried, says business is holding steady and not to worry about anything." Tony Castellano ran my shop when I wasn't around, a good man with steady hands and an honest heart. Knowing he was keeping things together gave me some peace of mind, but it didn't explain why my wife and best friend had apparently written me off. On day 18, Patricia mentioned the observation casually, perhaps not understanding its significance. "I saw a woman matching your wife's description in the parking lot yesterday. She was with a man, kissing him before coming up to visit." The words hit me like a second collision. "What did he look like?" "Tall, well-dressed, expensive car, dark hair, maybe 40-something. The description aligned with features I knew intimately. Scott Thornton, whose absence now explained itself through presence in locations that visitor logs would never capture. I requested Patricia's assistance in confirming future observations, establishing surveillance through medical staff whose access to parking lot windows exceeded my current mobility. She agreed with the grim understanding of someone who'd witnessed this particular tragedy before. "I'm sorry, Robert," she said quietly. "I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've seen enough to know when something isn't right. Reports arrived across subsequent days, arrivals synchronized, departures following intervals that suggested intimacy conducted in vehicles before the performance of hospital visitation began. Scott's BMW parked beside Diane's Lexus, two figures embracing before separating, one heading toward the hospital entrance while the other drove away. The confirmation settled into my chest like a weight I'd carry forever. My wife of 15 years and my best friend of 25 were conducting their affair in the parking lot of the hospital, where I lay recovering from injuries that could have ended my life. The audacity of it was almost impressive. My phone's recording function tested successfully during physical therapy sessions, technology that would capture confessions she delivered to an audience she believed unconscious. The plan formed slowly, carefully, while occupational therapists helped me regain strength and range of motion. If Diane wanted to play games, I'd make sure I understood all the rules first. Her next visit found me feigning sleep, the practiced breathing of someone who had learned to manufacture unconsciousness convincingly while remaining entirely alert. She entered with her usual brisk efficiency, heels clicking against linoleum, designer purse settling onto the visitor's chair with barely a whisper. "God, Robert, you look terrible," she said to my apparently sleeping form. "The doctors say you're improving, but honestly, I don't see it. This whole situation is such a nightmare." I kept my breathing steady, my face slack with pharmaceutical neutrality, while my phone recorded from beneath the blanket. "Scott thinks we should wait until you're completely recovered before making any major decisions, but I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The pretending, the scheduling, the constant worry about someone seeing us together. Your accident ruined everything we had planned." Her words referenced Scott in terms that required no interpretation: frustration about their separation, anticipation of my recovery so their arrangement could resume without the current complications. She spoke with the casual cruelty of someone who believed no audience witnessed, complaints about the inconvenience my injury created for her actual priorities. "I know this sounds terrible, but part of me wishes you'd just—" She paused, and I heard her sigh deeply. "No, that's not fair. You didn't ask for this to happen. But Scott and we have something real, Robert. Something I haven't felt in years. When you get out of here, we need to talk about our future, or lack thereof." The confession continued for another 10 minutes, each word adding detail to the complete picture of betrayal conducted while machines monitored my vital signs and professionals fought to preserve my life. She mentioned their plans to wait for my recovery before filing for divorce, their concern about appearances, Scott's worry about how it might affect his position at Mitchell Industries if word got out about the affair. "I should go," Diane said finally. "Scott's taking me to dinner at that new place downtown, the Italian one you always said was too expensive." She laughed, a sound I'd once found charming but now recognized as something cold and calculating. Funny how priorities change. After she left, I lay in genuine silence for 20 minutes, processing what I'd heard. My wife wasn't just cheating, she was planning her exit strategy with the precision of a corporate attorney, timing everything to minimize her inconvenience and maximize her advantage. And Scott, my supposed best friend, was helping her do it. Patricia appeared during evening rounds, her expression carefully neutral. "How are you feeling tonight?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I said, managing a weak smile. "But I'm starting to see things more clearly." She nodded knowingly. Clarity can be painful sometimes. "Patricia, I need a favor. Could you help me contact an attorney? Someone who specializes in divorce cases?" "I know someone," she said quietly. "Constance Ashworth. She's tough, fair, and she doesn't lose often." The irony wasn't lost on me. Constance Ashworth was a senior partner at the firm where Diane worked. If anyone understood the playing field, it would be her. "Could you make the call?" "Consider it done." Additional visits from Diane produced additional recordings, each one adding layers to her deception. She complained about having to cancel plans with Scott, worried about maintaining appearances at work, and speculated about how quickly she could move out once I was discharged. She never once asked about my pain levels, my prognosis, or how I was handling the trauma of nearly losing my life. During one particularly revealing conversation with my unconscious form, she mentioned their timeline. Scott thinks we should wait at least 3 months after you're home before I file the papers. Make it look like we tried to work things out. His company is very conservative about these things, and he can't afford any scandal right now. He's up for a promotion to regional manager. So that was it. My near demise was inconvenient because it disrupted their carefully planned betrayal. They'd mapped out my humiliation like a business proposal, complete with timelines and risk assessments. Recovery permitted legal consultation conducted through laptop screens, attorneys reviewing evidence while physical therapists restored mobility that would eventually carry me toward divorce proceedings. Constance Ashworth proved to be exactly what Patricia had promised, a steel-haired woman in her 50s with the kind of sharp intelligence that cut through pretense like a blade. "Mr. Mercer," she said during our video conference, "I've reviewed the recordings you've provided. While Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, this evidence will be invaluable for property division and spousal support negotiations. Your wife's affair, particularly with someone in her professional circle, gives us significant leverage." "What about Scott?" I asked. "That's more complicated. He's not married, so there's no alienation of affection claim. However, if his company has a morality clause or ethics policy, this information might be relevant to his employment situation." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'd like to explore all available options." "I thought you might. I'll have preliminary papers drawn up immediately. Given your wife's legal background, we'll need to be thorough and aggressive from the start." Dr. Harrison Cole, my attending physician, cleared me for discharge on day 22. A dry, professional man in his 50s who'd guided my recovery with competent detachment, he seemed genuinely pleased with my progress. "You're healing remarkably well, Mr. Mercer. The physical therapy has restored most of your mobility, and the cognitive assessments show no lasting effects from the concussion. You'll need to continue outpatient therapy for another month, but you should be able to return to work within 2 weeks. Thank you, doctor, for everything." He nodded curtly. "Take care of yourself. And Mr. Mercer? Sometimes the hardest part of recovery happens after you leave the hospital." I wondered if he somehow knew about Diane and Scott, if the medical staff had shared their observations. But it didn't matter now. I was ready to face whatever came next. Patricia helped me gather my belongings on discharge day, her expression mixing professional satisfaction with personal concern. "You're sure you're ready for this?" "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." She handed me a small card with her personal number. "If you need someone to talk to, or if you need a witness for anything legal, call me. What they did to you while you were fighting for your life, that's not right." I exited the hospital carrying documentation sufficient for proceedings that required no additional evidence, the papers filed before Diane realized that sleep sometimes listens, and listeners sometimes record. Constance had worked with remarkable speed, preparing a comprehensive divorce filing that would be served within hours of my return home. The irony was perfect. Diane thought she was controlling the timeline, managing the narrative, protecting her precious career and Scott's promotion prospects. She had no idea that her unconscious husband had been taking notes, gathering evidence, and preparing for war. As I settled into the passenger seat of Tony's pickup truck for the ride home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 weeks. Anticipation. Not happiness, not hope, but the cold satisfaction of someone who'd been underestimated by people who should have known better. "How you feeling, boss?" Tony asked as we pulled away from the hospital. "Like I'm finally waking up," I said, watching the building disappear in the side mirror. "And I've got a lot of catching up to do." The house felt like a museum of my former life when I walked through the front door. Everything exactly as I'd left it 3 weeks ago, except for the subtle signs of Diane's careful editing. Her coffee cup in the sink, rinsed but not washed. A wine glass beside it. 2 glasses, actually, though she'd claimed to be working late most nights during my hospitalization. The mail stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, bills and catalogs sorted with her typical efficiency. I moved through the rooms slowly, partly because my ribs still ached with every deep breath, but mostly because I was seeing everything with new eyes. The wedding photos on the mantel looked like evidence from someone else's life. The comfortable furniture we'd chosen together felt like props in a play I'd been watching without realizing I was the comedy relief. My cell phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Heard you were discharged today. Working late on the Morrison case. We'll be home around 10. Hope you're feeling better." Working late. Right. I checked my watch. 6:30 p.m. That gave me 3.5 hours to prepare for her performance. The process server had been remarkably efficient. Constance had arranged for the papers to be delivered to Diane's office at exactly 5 p.m., ensuring maximum professional embarrassment. By now, she knew that her unconscious husband had been more aware than she'd assumed. I called Tony to check on the shop. "Everything's running smooth, boss. Had that insurance adjuster come by about the Henderson claim, approved the full estimate. Mrs. Patterson picked up her Camry, said to tell you she's praying for your recovery." "Any word from Scott Thornton?" Tony paused. "Funny you should ask. He called this morning, wanted to know when you'd be back. Seemed real interested in your schedule." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. Figured if he cared that much he could have visited you in the hospital like the rest of us." Tony had always been perceptive. "Good thinking. If he calls again, let me know immediately." "You got it, boss. You need anything tonight?" "Just some peace and quiet to get my head straight." After we hung up, I settled into my recliner with a beer and waited. The recordings from the hospital played through my earbuds while I transcribed the most damaging quotes. Diane's voice, clear and cold, discussing their timeline, their concerns about appearances, their plans for my future without consulting me. "Scott thinks we should wait at least 3 months after you're home before I file the papers. Your accident ruined everything we had planned. I know this sounds terrible, but part of me wishes you'd just..." That last one was particularly interesting. She'd stopped herself before completing the thought, but the implication was clear enough for any reasonable person to understand. My wife had wished, even briefly, that my accident had been more permanent. The front door opened at 10:15 p.m. Diane entered with her usual brisk energy, designer heels clicking against hardwood, briefcase in one hand and dry cleaning in the other. She looked surprised to see me in the living room. "Robert, you should have called. I would have come home earlier." She set down her things and approached with what I recognized as her courtroom smile, professional, controlled, designed to convey concern without revealing actual emotion. "I figured you were busy," I said, not getting up from the chair. "How was work?" "Exhausting. The Morrison case is more complicated than we initially thought." She perched on the edge of the couch, maintaining distance while appearing attentive. "How are you feeling? You look much better than you did in the hospital." "Funny thing about being unconscious," I said, watching her face carefully. "Sometimes you hear things you're not supposed to hear." Her expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Concern? Fear? Calculation? "What do you mean?" "I mean, I wasn't as out of it as everyone thought, especially during your visits." Now her composure cracked slightly. "Robert, you were heavily medicated. The doctor said you might have some confusion about..." "I recorded our conversations, Diane." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. She went very still, her attorney instincts taking over, evaluating threats and calculating responses. "I don't understand what you're suggesting." I pulled out my phone and played back 30 seconds of her voice. "Scott thinks we should wait at least 3 months after you're home before I file the papers. Make it look like we tried to work things out." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, then opened it again. For the first time in 15 years of marriage, Diane Mercer was speechless. "How long?" I asked quietly. "Robert, I can explain. How long have you been sleeping with my best friend?" She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back, her mind clearly racing through legal implications and damage control strategies. When she finally spoke, her voice had the careful neutrality of someone giving a deposition. 6 months. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Nothing just happens, Diane. You're a lawyer. You plan everything. We tried to stop it. We knew it was wrong. But Robert, we haven't been happy for years. You know that. We've been going through the motions, staying together out of habit more than love. So you decided to make that choice for both of us? We were going to tell you, after you recovered. We wanted to handle this maturely, like adults. I laughed, a sound that came out harsher than I intended. Maturely? You were planning my divorce while I was in intensive care. You wished I'd just... What was it you said? Oh, right. You stopped yourself before you finished that particular thought. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I never meant that. I was emotional, confused. I've been under enormous stress. Stress? I stood up slowly, my ribs protesting the movement. You want to talk about stress? I nearly died 3 weeks ago. Spent 21 days wondering why my wife couldn't be bothered to visit and why my best friend had disappeared. Turns out they were both too busy screwing each other to care whether I lived or died. That's not fair. Fair? I moved closer, watching her retreat toward the door. What's fair about conducting your affair in the hospital parking lot? What's fair about timing your betrayal around my recovery schedule? What's fair about planning to wait 3 months to file divorce papers so it wouldn't hurt Scott's promotion prospects? Her face went white. You recorded everything. Everything, Diane. Every visit, every conversation, every casual cruelty you delivered to my unconscious body. I've got it all documented, transcribed, and filed with my attorney. Your attorney? The professional in her was taking over, assessing legal threats. Who? Constance Ashworth. The name hit her like a physical blow. Constance was not only a senior partner at Diane's firm, but also her mentor and the closest thing she had to a friend in the legal community. The betrayal was complete now, personal, professional, and social. She can't represent you. There's a conflict of interest. Already cleared it with the state bar. Since you're opposing parties in a domestic matter, there's no ethical violation. Constance was very thorough about that. Diane sank back onto the couch, her composure finally cracking completely. Robert, please. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers and court battles. We can handle this privately. Like you handled our marriage? Like you handled your affair? Like you handled visiting your husband in the ICU? I'm sorry, she whispered. I know how this looks. I know I hurt you. But we can still be civilized about this. I walked to the front closet and pulled out a suitcase. Her suitcase, the expensive one she'd bought for the business trips that I now realized probably included Scott. Here's how we're going to be civilized, I said, setting it down in front of her. You're going to pack what you need for the next few days and find somewhere else to stay. Tomorrow, Constance will contact your attorney to discuss property division and settlement terms. The house is in my name, bought with money from my business, so you'll need to make other arrangements. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can. Michigan law is very clear about this. Adultery might not affect the divorce decree, but it certainly affects who gets to stay in the marital home during proceedings. She stared at the suitcase for a long moment, then looked up at me with something that might have been genuine regret. I never wanted it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, and now we all get to live with the consequences. She packed in silence while I sat in my chair, watching her move through our bedroom like a stranger gathering evidence from a crime scene. When she finished, she paused at the front door. Where will you go? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Scott's place, I suppose. Give him my regards. And Diane? Tell him I'll be in touch soon. We have a lot to discuss. After she left, I walked through the house again, this time appreciating the silence. No clicking heels, no false concern, no performance of a marriage that had been over far longer than I'd realized. My phone rang at 11:30 p.m. Scott's number. Robert, thank God you're okay. I just heard about the accident. Diane said you were in the hospital for weeks. I've been out of town on business, completely out of touch. I came back as soon as I could. His voice carried the practiced sincerity of a professional salesman, but I could hear the tension underneath. Diane had obviously filled him in on the evening's events. Scott, I said pleasantly. Good to hear from you, buddy. Where have you been? I could have used a friend these past few weeks. Chicago, then Detroit, then Cleveland. The Morrison Industries account has been a nightmare. I tried calling the hospital, but they said you weren't taking calls. Funny, they never mentioned any calls from you. But hey, maybe there was some confusion. Hospital communication can be pretty spotty. A pause. Robert, is everything okay? You sound different. 3 weeks in intensive care will do that to a person. Really gives you time to think about what's important, like friendship and loyalty and trust. Another pause, longer this time. Diane mentioned you two are having some problems. Did she? What exactly did she mention? Just that things have been difficult. The stress of your accident, financial concerns, that sort of thing. She seemed pretty upset. I bet she did. Tell me, Scott, how long have you been comforting my wife during these difficult times? The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. We need to talk. Yes, we do, but not tonight. I'm still recovering and I need my rest. But soon, Scott. Very soon, we're going to have a long conversation about friendship and loyalty and what happens when people think they're smarter than they actually are. I hung up before he could respond. The house felt different now. Not empty, but clean. Like a wound that had been drained of infection and could finally begin to heal. I had recordings. I had evidence. I had a ruthless attorney. And I had something my wife and former best friend didn't expect. Time to plan my next moves carefully. Patricia had been right. The hardest part of recovery was just beginning. But as I settled into bed in what was now truly my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Anticipation for tomorrow. They thought they'd been so clever, timing their betrayal, managing the narrative, protecting their careers and reputations. They had no idea that their unconscious victim had been taking notes. The war was just beginning, and I intended to win it. The next morning brought rain and revelation in equal measure. I woke to the sound of water against windows and the absence of Diane's morning routine. No coffee brewing, no shower running, no news program murmuring from the kitchen television. The silence felt like a gift. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Scott and 3 text messages, each more desperate than the last. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Call me back, please. I deleted them without responding and made my own coffee, stronger than Diane ever preferred it. The morning newspaper lay unopened on the kitchen table, another small pleasure I could reclaim. As I read the sports section and drank my coffee in peace, I began planning the next phase of my recovery. Constance called at 9 a.m. sharp. Good morning, Robert. I trust your first night of freedom was restful? Better than I've slept in years. Excellent. I have updates on several fronts. First, I've been contacted by Harrison, Mitchell, and Associates. They're representing your wife. David Harrison is competent, but not particularly creative. We can work with that. What about the recordings? Admissible and devastating. Even in a no-fault state, evidence of adultery affects property division, spousal support, and custody arrangements. Since you have no children, we're primarily concerned with assets and support. The house, your business, your retirement accounts, all of that is protected. And Scott? That's where things get interesting. I did some research on Mitchell Industries. They have a comprehensive ethics policy that specifically addresses employee conduct that might reflect poorly on the company. Adultery with a client's spouse would certainly qualify. Diane's firm handles some of Mitchell's legal work. Exactly. This creates multiple conflicts of interest and potential professional violations. Your friend Mr. Thornton might find his promotion prospects significantly diminished. I smiled into my coffee. What do you need from me? Documentation of the relationship's timeline, any evidence of their meetings during business hours, anything that connects their affair to their professional responsibilities. The more we can demonstrate that this wasn't just a personal betrayal, but a professional one, the more leverage we have. After we hung up, I drove to the shop for the first time since the accident. Tony had kept everything running smoothly. The work bays were busy, the books were current, and the coffee was still terrible. My crew welcomed me back with the kind of genuine warmth that made Diane and Scott's betrayal seem even more pathetic. "Boss looks good," said Miguel, my best body man. "Thought we might lose you for a while there." "Takes more than a drunk driver to keep me down," I replied, settling into my office chair with only minor discomfort. Besides, I had too much unfinished business to check out permanently. Tony joined me in the office, closing the door behind him. "You want to tell me what's really going on? Scott Thornton called here 6 times this morning, sounding pretty desperate." I gave Tony the condensed version, the affair, the recordings, the divorce proceedings. He listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That son of a gun," he said finally. And here I thought he was just being a lousy friend. Turns out he was being a lousy human being. "It gets better. I need you to do some research for me. Scott drives a silver BMW license plate." I wrote down the number. "And he works at Mitchell Industries downtown. I want to know his schedule, his habits, where he goes for lunch, where he parks. Can you handle that discreetly?" Tony grinned. "My cousin Danny works security at the Mitchell building. He owes me a favor from when I fixed his Mustang for free. Consider it done. Nothing illegal, Tony. Just observation." "Understood, boss. Just keeping an eye on the neighborhood. I spent the morning catching up on business, reviewing estimates and talking to customers. The routine felt therapeutic, a reminder that I'd built something solid and valuable with my own hands. Unlike my marriage, the shop was built on honest work and mutual respect." Around noon, Patricia called from the hospital. "I hope you don't mind me checking in. I wanted to see how your first day back in the world was going." "Better than expected. Thank you for everything, Patricia. The recordings, the attorney recommendation, the moral support. I couldn't have gotten through this without you. I've seen too many good people get taken advantage of when they're vulnerable. What your wife did while you were fighting for your life, that's unforgivable. Speaking of which, I might need you to testify about what you observed in the parking lot. Would you be willing?" "Absolutely. I documented everything in my personal notes just in case. Dates, times, descriptions, license plate numbers. If this goes to court, I'll be ready." After lunch, I received an unexpected visitor. Scott Thornton walked into my shop wearing an expensive suit and a nervous expression, looking as out of place as a diamond ring in a toolbox. "Robert," he said, approaching my office with cautious steps, "I'm glad you're back on your feet." "Scott," I replied, not getting up from my desk. "This is a surprise. What brings you to my humble establishment?" He glanced around at my crew who had stopped working to stare at him with unconcealed hostility. Word travels fast in a small shop, and loyalty runs deep among working people. "Could we talk privately?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Have a seat. Tony, could you close the door?" Tony complied, but positioned himself just outside the glass partition where he could see everything. Scott noticed and shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Robert, I know how this must look." "How does it look, Scott?" "Like I betrayed our friendship. Like I went behind your back with your wife. Like I'm the worst kind of friend imaginable. Interesting, that's exactly how it looks to me too. He leaned forward, his salesman instincts kicking in. But it's not that simple. Diane and I, we didn't plan this. It just happened. We were both lonely, both unhappy in our situations. You and Diane had been growing apart for years, you know that's true. So you decided to help the process along? We tried to fight it. We knew it was wrong. But sometimes feelings are stronger than good intentions. I studied his face, looking for any trace of the friend I'd known for 25 years. All I saw was a stranger trying to sell me something I didn't want to buy. How long, Scott? 6 months, maybe 7. It started innocent, just talking, having lunch, comparing notes about relationships and careers. Then one day it became something more. While I was working 60-hour weeks to build my business, while I was taking care of my mother during her chemotherapy, while I was dealing with the stress that was supposedly driving Diane away. His face reddened. We never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, and you kept hurting me for 7 months, and you would have kept hurting me indefinitely if I hadn't nearly died in that accident. Robert, please, we can work this out. We're all adults here. People grow apart, feelings change, life moves on. It doesn't have to destroy our friendship. I stood up slowly, my ribs still tender, but my resolve stronger than ever. Our friendship was destroyed the first time you kissed my wife. Everything since then has just been cleanup. Don't be like this. We've been friends since high school. That has to count for something. It did count for something. It counted for trust, loyalty, and respect, all of which you threw away for a few months of sneaking around with another man's wife. Scott's composure cracked. She was going to leave you anyway. Your marriage was over, Robert. We just helped it end faster. There it is, I said quietly. The truth finally comes out. You convinced yourself you were doing me a favor by sleeping with my wife. That's not what I meant. Get out of my shop, Scott. Robert, please. Get out now before I ask my crew to escort you out. And Scott, don't come back. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't send messages through mutual friends. We're done. He stood up reluctantly, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You're making a mistake. This doesn't have to be a war. You started the war when you decided my wife was more interesting than my friendship. I'm just finishing it. After he left, Tony came into the office. You handled that well, boss. A lot of guys would have taken a swing at him. Violence is for people who don't have better options, I replied. I have much better options. That evening, I called Constance with an update on Scott's visit. She listened with professional interest, taking notes on his admissions and timeline. His visit was actually helpful, she said. He confirmed the duration of the affair and admitted they discussed ending your marriage. That supports our argument that this was a premeditated betrayal, not a momentary lapse in judgment. What's our next move? I'm filing for expedited proceedings based on the evidence of adultery and abandonment. We'll also be requesting full financial disclosure from both parties, bank records, credit card statements, phone records, everything. If they've been using marital assets to fund their affair, we'll recover every penny. And Scott's employment situation? I've prepared a comprehensive report for Mitchell Industries' Human Resources Department. It documents the affair, the professional conflicts of interest, and the potential liability issues. I'll be sending it tomorrow. Will that be enough to affect his promotion? Mr. Mercer, by the time I'm finished, he'll be lucky to keep his current position. After we hung up, I sat in my recliner with a beer and considered how much my life had changed in just 48 hours. 2 days ago, I was a betrayed husband lying in a hospital bed, wondering why the people I loved had abandoned me. Tonight, I was a man with a plan, evidence, allies, and the cold satisfaction of someone who'd been underestimated by people who should have known better. My phone buzzed with another text from Diane. We need to talk about the house, the finances, everything. This doesn't have to be ugly. I typed back, "You made it ugly when you started screwing my best friend. Everything else is just paperwork." She didn't respond, which told me she was finally beginning to understand the scope of her miscalculation. She'd thought she was dealing with a heartbroken husband who would quietly accept his humiliation and cooperate with their timeline. Instead, she was dealing with a man who'd had 3 weeks to think, plan, and prepare for war. The rain had stopped, and through my living room window, I could see stars beginning to appear between the clouds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to demonstrate that sleeping dogs, when finally awakened, can bite with surprising force. I raised my beer in a toast to the empty house. "Here's to second chances," I said aloud, "and to making sure the people who tried to take away my first chance learn exactly what that costs." The war was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I was confident about the outcome. Diane and Scott had made their choice when they thought I was unconscious and helpless. Now they were about to discover what I could accomplish when I was wide awake and highly motivated. 3 days into my new life as a divorced man in progress, I discovered that revenge is a lot like bodywork. It requires patience, precision, and the right tools for the job. Danny, Tony's cousin, had proven remarkably thorough in his surveillance of Scott's daily routine. "Your boy's a creature of habit," Danny reported over coffee at Murphy's Tavern. "Arrives at Mitchell Industries every morning at 8:15, parks in space 47 of the executive lot, lunch at Romano's restaurant every Tuesday and Thursday with the same group of sales guys, leaves the office around 6 p.m. most nights, heads straight to that fancy gym on Maple Street." "What about evenings?" "That's where it gets interesting. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he goes home to his condo. Tuesday and Thursday, he meets a woman at the Marriott downtown. Expensive blonde, drives a white Lexus. Diane's car. They'd established a schedule for their affair, treating adultery like a business appointment. The professional efficiency of it was almost impressive." "Any chance you could get me Scott's work schedule for the next few weeks?" Danny grinned. "Already ahead of you." He slid a folded paper across the table. "Mitchell Industries posts all employee travel schedules on the internal bulletin board. Your buddy's got a sales trip to Indianapolis next week, then a regional conference in Grand Rapids the week after that." "Perfect. What do I owe you for this?" "Nothing, man. Tony told me what this guy did to you. Some things you don't charge for." That afternoon, Constance called with updates from multiple fronts. "The financial discovery is producing interesting results. Your wife and Mr. Thornton have been remarkably careless about covering their tracks." "How careless?" "Hotel charges on both their credit cards for the same dates and locations. Restaurant bills for 2 people when their spouses were supposedly working late. Mr. Thornton even purchased jewelry from Hartwell's, a very expensive necklace that I doubt he bought for himself. Diane has a new necklace, diamond pendant. She said it was a gift from a grateful client." "I'm sure she did. We'll be requesting receipts for all such gifts during the discovery process. Michigan law is very clear about dissipation of marital assets for extramarital relationships." "What about Scott's employment situation?" "Mitchell Industries has scheduled a meeting with him for tomorrow morning. I'm told it will be conducted by the head of human resources and the company's legal counsel. They take ethics violations very seriously, particularly when they involve potential conflicts of interest with client relationships." "Diane's firm represents Mitchell Industries." "Exactly. Mr. Thornton's affair with an attorney from their legal firm creates multiple liability issues. At minimum, he'll face disciplinary action. More likely, he'll be terminated." After we hung up, I drove to the shop and found Tony working on a 1967 Mustang that had been in a minor fender bender. The car was a classic, deserving of careful restoration rather than quick fixes. "Beautiful car," I said, running my hand along the undamaged rear quarter panel. "Original paint?" "Owner says it's been in his family since new. Wants it perfect, not just functional. That's the difference between a professional and a hack. Anyone can make it run. It takes skill to make it right." Tony looked up from his work. Speaking of making things right, Danny called. Says Scott's schedule is pretty predictable. I was thinking about that. Predictable schedules create opportunities. What kind of opportunities? I pulled out my phone and showed Tony a photo I'd taken that morning. Scott's BMW, parked in his usual spot at Mitchell Industries. Beautiful car, but it has one significant vulnerability. What's that? It's parked in the same place every day, surrounded by security cameras that focus on preventing theft, not documenting minor vandalism. Tony grinned. Boss, I like where this is going. Nothing permanent, nothing that can't be repaired, just enough inconvenience to let him know that his actions have consequences. When? Tomorrow morning, while he's in his meeting with Human Resources. I want him to walk out of the worst day of his professional life and find that his personal life has gotten complicated too. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Patricia. Robert, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. What's going on? Your wife came to the hospital today. She was asking questions about my observations during your stay, whether I'd documented anything, if I'd spoken to any attorneys. What did you tell her? Nothing. Patient confidentiality extends to family members too. But she seemed pretty desperate. Offered to compensate me for my time, if I could clarify exactly what I'd seen in the parking lot. She tried to bribe you? That's how I interpreted it. I told her my memory was very clear, and my documentation was very thorough, and that any further questions should go through the hospital's legal department. Patricia, I can't thank you enough for everything. Just promise me you'll be careful. Desperate people make poor decisions, and your wife strikes me as someone who's used to getting her way. After we hung up, I considered Patricia's warning. Diane was beginning to realize that her carefully planned exit strategy was falling apart. Her professional reputation was at risk, her affair was documented, and her attempts to control the narrative were failing. That made her dangerous in ways I needed to consider. My phone rang at 9 p.m. Diane's number. Robert, we need to meet. Tonight. I don't think that's a good idea. All communication should go through our attorneys. Please, this is important. There are things you don't understand, complications that could hurt both of us if this gets out of control. Such as? Not over the phone. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern in an hour. Public place, neutral territory. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Murphy's was indeed neutral territory, a blue-collar bar where Diane would be as out of place as I'd been in her corporate law world. If she wanted to negotiate, she could do it on my turf. I arrived first and claimed a corner booth with clear sight lines to both entrances. Murphy's was busy for a weeknight, filled with the usual mix of shift workers, retirees, and people who preferred their drinks strong and their conversations honest. Diane arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. She looked tired, stressed, and younger somehow, more like the woman I'd married 15 years ago. Thank you for coming, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. You said there were complications. What kind of complications? She ordered a wine. They didn't have her usual brand, so she settled for house white and took a sip before answering. Scott's company is conducting an investigation. They've requested all his communication records, travel expenses, client contact logs. If they dig deep enough, they'll find things that could implicate my firm. What kind of things? Information sharing. Scott had access to details about Mitchell Industries' business plans, expansion strategies, personnel decisions, information that might have influenced some of our legal advice to other clients. I leaned back in the booth, processing this revelation. You're talking about insider trading, or at least conflicts of interest that could get you both disbarred. It's not that simple. It never is with you, Diane. But let me guess. You and Scott weren't just sharing a bed, you were sharing privileged information. We talked about work. Everyone talks about work with their partners. Except Scott wasn't your partner. He was your affair, and you were both using confidential information to advance your careers. She finished her wine in 2 large swallows. If this comes out in divorce proceedings, it won't just hurt Scott and me. It could destroy both our firms, cost hundreds of people their jobs. So you want me to what? Keep quiet about your affair to protect your professional misconduct? I want you to consider the collateral damage. You're not just hurting us, Robert. You're hurting innocent people who had nothing to do with our marriage problems. I signaled the bartender for another beer, taking my time to consider her words. She was right about the collateral damage, but wrong about who was responsible for it. You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with a client's employee, I said finally. You should have thought about it before you conducted your affair in a hospital parking lot while your husband was fighting for his life. You should have thought about it before you tried to bribe a nurse to change her testimony. Her face went pale. How did you... Patricia called me. Apparently you offered to compensate her for her time if she could modify her recollection of events. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And now you want me to help you cover up your professional misconduct because exposing your personal misconduct might have consequences. Robert, please. We can work this out. I'll give you everything. The house, the business assets, my retirement account. You can have it all. Just don't let this destroy innocent people's lives. Innocent people? I leaned forward, my voice low but carrying clearly in the noisy bar. What about my life, Diane? What about the 3 weeks I spent in intensive care wondering why my wife couldn't be bothered to visit? What about 15 years of marriage that you threw away for a few months of excitement with my best friend? I know I hurt you. You didn't hurt me. You tried to destroy me. The only reason you failed is because I was tougher than you expected. I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. Here's what's going to happen, Diane. Tomorrow, Scott gets fired. Next week, the state bar receives a complaint about your professional conduct. The week after that, every detail of your affair becomes part of the public record in our divorce proceedings. You want to minimize collateral damage? You should have thought about that before you declared war on your own husband. Robert, wait. But I was already walking away, leaving her alone in a bar full of people who understood the value of loyalty and the cost of betrayal. As I drove home through the quiet streets of my town, I felt the cold satisfaction of someone who'd been underestimated by people who should have known better. Tomorrow would bring Scott's professional destruction and the next phase of my comprehensive revenge. Diane was finally beginning to understand that her unconscious husband had been taking notes, planning strategy, and preparing for total war. The hunter had indeed become the hunted, but not in the way she'd expected. I wasn't running from her anymore. I was pursuing her with the methodical patience of someone who'd learned that the best revenge is served with careful planning and perfect timing. My phone buzzed with a text as I pulled into my driveway. This isn't over. I typed back, "You're absolutely right. It's just getting started." Scott's BMW looked like it had been targeted by a very precise, very angry vandal when he discovered it after his termination meeting. Someone had used a key to carve "cheater" into the driver's side door, filled the door locks with superglue, and placed a rotting fish under the front seat. The smell would take weeks to eliminate completely. Tony's handiwork was subtle but effective. The damage was expensive enough to be infuriating, but not severe enough to involve police. Just a message from someone who wanted Scott to understand that his actions had consequences. I watched from across the street as Scott discovered his car, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and recognition. He knew exactly who was responsible, but he couldn't prove it. The security cameras focused on preventing theft, not documenting minor vandalism in broad daylight. My phone rang as Scott tried unsuccessfully to open his driver's door. "You son of a..." Scott's voice was tight with rage. "Scott, how did your meeting go this morning? You know exactly how it went, and you know who trashed my car. I know you got fired for violating company ethics policies. As for your car, Well, adultery makes a lot of enemies. Could have been anyone. This is harassment, Robert. I can have you arrested. For what? I've been at my shop all morning, surrounded by witnesses. If someone vandalized your car, you should probably file a police report. I'm sure they'll investigate thoroughly. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. We both knew he wouldn't involve the police. Too many questions he couldn't answer without admitting to the affair. What do you want? He asked finally. I want my best friend back, but since that's impossible, I'll settle for watching you learn that choices have consequences. We were going to tell you. When? After you got your promotion? After Diane made partner? After I conveniently died in that accident? That's not fair. Fair, I laughed, watching him struggle with his super-glued locks. You want to talk about fair? Call me when you've spent 3 weeks in intensive care wondering why the people you trusted most in the world abandoned you. Then we can discuss what's fair. I hung up and drove back to the shop, where Tony was waiting with updates from Danny. Mitchell Industries cleaned house, Tony reported. Scott got terminated with cause, no severance, no references. They're also conducting an internal audit of all his client interactions over the past year. What about the information sharing with Diane? That's where it gets interesting. Turns out Scott had access to confidential merger discussions, personnel changes, even some preliminary acquisition targets. If he shared any of that with Diane's firm, both companies could face serious legal issues. Serious enough to destroy careers? Serious enough to involve federal regulators? That afternoon, Constance called with her own updates. The discovery process has uncovered some fascinating details about your wife's relationship with Mr. Thornton. They've been remarkably careless about documentation. How careless? Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even a joint vacation to Chicago that they both claimed as business expenses. But the most interesting discovery is a series of emails between Diane and her senior partner discussing Mitchell Industries' legal strategy. What kind of strategy? The kind that would be very valuable to someone in Scott's position. Merger timelines, regulatory concerns, personnel decisions that could affect stock prices. If Scott used any of this information in his sales role, we're looking at potential securities violations. Can you prove he used the information? I don't have to prove it. I just have to document that he had access to it through his relationship with your wife. Mitchell Industries and the SEC can draw their own conclusions. When do you plan to release this information? I'm meeting with Mitchell's legal counsel tomorrow morning. They have a right to know that their former employee may have had access to privileged information through his affair with opposing counsel. After we hung up, I realized that Diane and Scott's affair had created a web of professional and legal complications that extended far beyond their personal betrayal. They'd been so focused on managing their timeline and protecting their careers that they'd ignored the obvious conflicts of interest. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. We need to talk. Immediately. I typed back, all communication through attorneys. This is bigger than our divorce. People are going to get hurt. Should have thought about that sooner. Meet me at the house. 1 hour, please. Against my better judgment, a pattern I was beginning to recognize, I agreed to meet her. But this time, I'd be prepared for whatever desperation might drive her to attempt. I arrived at what used to be our house to find Diane's Lexus already in the driveway. She was waiting in the living room, pacing like a caged animal, her professional composure completely shattered. Thank you for coming, she said without looking at me. You said people were going to get hurt. What people? Everyone at my firm, everyone at Mitchell Industries, hundreds of innocent people whose only crime was working for companies that got caught up in our personal problems. Your personal problems became professional problems when you started sharing confidential information with your lover. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. I never shared confidential information with Scott. The email records say otherwise. Those emails were taken out of context. We discussed general business trends, industry developments, nothing specific enough to constitute insider trading. That's not for you to decide, Diane. That's for federal regulators to determine after they review all the evidence. Robert, please. I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust and destroyed our marriage, but this will ruin innocent people's lives. Like you tried to ruin mine? That's different. How is it different? You conducted an affair with my best friend while I was in intensive care. You planned my divorce without consulting me. You tried to bribe a hospital employee to change her testimony. You've lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone around you to protect your own interests. Now you want me to protect you from the consequences? She sank onto the couch, her face in her hands. I never meant for it to get this complicated. Complicated? I sat down across from her, studying the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. You think this is complicated? This is simple, Diane. You made choices, and now you get to live with them. What if I told you everything? Every detail, every conversation, every piece of information that might have been shared inappropriately? Would that change anything? Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of lying. Because I want this to end. Because maybe if I tell the truth, we can find a way to minimize the damage to everyone else. I considered her offer carefully. Complete honesty from Diane would be valuable, but it would also be unprecedented. She'd built her entire career on controlling information, managing narratives, and protecting her clients' interests. Tell me about Chicago, I said. What about Chicago? You and Scott both claimed business expenses for a trip to Chicago last month. Same hotel, same dates. What was the real purpose of that trip? She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed deeply. Scott had a client meeting with Morrison Industries. I had a consultation with their legal department about a potential acquisition. We coordinated our schedules so we could spend time together. What did you discuss about the acquisition? General timeline, regulatory concerns, potential complications, nothing specific, nothing that would give Scott an unfair advantage in his sales role. But you did discuss it. We discussed everything, Robert. That's what people in relationships do. They talk about their work, their concerns, their professional challenges. People in relationships, yes. But you weren't in a relationship with Scott. You were married to me and having an affair with him. I know how it looks. It looks like corporate espionage disguised as pillow talk. Her phone rang, interrupting our conversation. She glanced at the screen and declined the call, but I caught a glimpse of the name. Senior partner. Your boss? I asked. Former boss. I was suspended pending the outcome of the ethics investigation. When did that happen? This morning, right after Scott got fired. Apparently, Mitchell Industries shared their concerns about information security with our managing partners. I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. So you're both unemployed now? Effectively, yes. Scott's been blacklisted from every major company in the region. I'll be lucky to keep my law license after the Bar Association reviews this mess. And you think I should feel sorry for you? I think you should consider whether destroying us is worth destroying everyone else who gets caught in the crossfire. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd planned to grow old together. The houses looked the same, but everything else had changed. You know what I think, Diane? I think you're still trying to manage the narrative, still trying to control the outcome, still trying to minimize your responsibility for the choices you made. That's not true. It's completely true. You're not here because you want to confess your sins or make amends for your betrayal. You're here because your carefully planned affair has turned into a professional disaster, and you want me to help you contain the damage. Robert, but here's the thing you still don't understand. I don't care about your career, your reputation, or your professional relationships. You destroyed those things when you decided my marriage was less important than your affair. I turned away from the window and faced her directly. This conversation is over. Any future communication goes through our attorneys. And Diane, next time you want to discuss minimizing collateral damage, remember that you created this situation by choosing to betray the one person who should have been able to trust you completely. I left her sitting in our former living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life she'd thrown away for a few months of excitement with my former best friend. As I drove back to my shop, I felt the cold satisfaction of someone who'd been underestimated by people who should have known better. The cat and mouse game was entering its final phase, and both cats were discovering that their mouse had developed some very sharp teeth. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new consequences, and new opportunities to demonstrate that sleeping dogs, when finally awakened, can bite with devastating precision. My phone buzzed with one final text from Diane. "You're going to regret this." I typed back, "The only thing I regret is not waking up sooner." The annual Riverside Festival was 3 days away when I received the call that would change everything. Patricia phoned me at the shop, her voice tight with concern and something that sounded like fear. "Robert, I need to see you immediately. Something's happened that you need to know about." "What kind of something?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Murphy's Tavern in 20 minutes? I found Patricia in the same corner booth where I'd confronted Diane a week earlier. She looked exhausted, stressed, and angry in a way I'd never seen during our interactions at the hospital. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure who else to call. "What's going on, Patricia?" She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. "Your wife came to see me again yesterday. This time, she wasn't offering bribes." I opened the envelope and found photographs, surveillance shots of Patricia leaving her apartment, walking to her car, entering the hospital. Professional quality images that suggested professional surveillance. "She's having you followed?" "Apparently. She also made it clear that my continued employment at the hospital might be affected by my willingness to testify in your divorce proceedings." "She threatened your job?" "Indirectly. She mentioned that the hospital's legal department might be interested in reviewing my adherence to patient confidentiality policies. Suggested that my documentation of personal observations might constitute a violation of professional ethics." I studied the photographs more carefully. They were taken over several days, showing Patricia's routine, her habits, her vulnerability. The message was clear. Diane knew where Patricia lived, where she worked, and how to hurt her. "There's more," Patricia continued. "I did some checking with friends at other hospitals. Your wife has been making inquiries about my professional history, my personal life, looking for anything she could use to discredit my testimony. What did she find? Nothing significant. But she's building a case that I'm a disgruntled employee with a history of overstepping professional boundaries. If this goes to court, she'll try to paint me as unreliable, vindictive, and professionally questionable." I felt anger building in my chest. Not the cold, calculated anger I'd been nursing for weeks, but something hotter and more immediate. Diane had crossed a line by threatening an innocent person who'd tried to help me. "Patricia, I'm sorry. I never intended for you to get caught up in this. I know. But I wanted you to understand what you're dealing with. Your wife isn't just desperate, she's dangerous. She's using professional resources and legal connections to intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice. What can I do to protect you?" "Nothing directly. But Robert, there's something else you need to know. Something I discovered while she was investigating me." She pulled out a second envelope, this one containing medical records and insurance documents. "I did some research on your accident, the drunk driver who hit you. His name is Kevin Walsh, and he works for a company that does occasional contract work for Mitchell Industries. Coincidence? Maybe, but Kevin Walsh has no memory of the accident. He claims he wasn't drinking that night, doesn't remember leaving the bar, doesn't remember getting in his car. The police found him unresponsive at the scene with an alcohol level just barely over the legal limit. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that your accident might not have been as random as everyone assumed. Kevin Walsh had access to your schedule through his company's relationship with Mitchell Industries. He knew you worked late on Thursdays, knew you took the same route home every week. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think Diane and Scott arranged my accident? I think they had motive, opportunity, and access to someone who could make it happen. Kevin Walsh is facing vehicular assault charges and potential prison time. He's desperate enough to do almost anything to reduce his sentence. But you can't prove it. Not yet. But if Kevin Walsh was paid to cause that accident, there will be evidence. Bank records, phone calls, meetings that can be documented and verified. I stared at the medical records, processing the possibility that my wife and best friend hadn't just betrayed me. They'd tried to eliminate me entirely. The accident that put me in intensive care for 3 weeks might have been a murder attempt disguised as drunk driving. Patricia, this is incredibly dangerous information. If you're right, and if Diane realizes you know, she'll do whatever it takes to silence you. I know. That's why I'm giving you everything I've discovered. If something happens to me, at least the evidence will survive. Nothing's going to happen to you. I won't let it. How can you stop it? She has resources, connections, and the desperation of someone who's facing the destruction of everything she's worked for. People like that don't hesitate to hurt innocent bystanders. I took the envelopes and stood up. Leave this to me, Patricia. And thank you for everything. You've gone above and beyond what anyone could expect. Just be careful, Robert. Your wife isn't the woman you married 15 years ago. She's someone who's capable of things you never imagined. That night, I called Constance and shared Patricia's discoveries. She listened in professional silence, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. If Patricia's suspicions are correct, Constance said finally, we're no longer talking about divorce proceedings. We're talking about attempted murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Can we prove any of it? With the right investigation, possibly. I have contacts in law enforcement who specialize in this kind of case. But Robert, you need to understand the risks. If your wife and Mr. Thornton are responsible for your accident, they won't hesitate to escalate their efforts to protect themselves. What do you recommend? Document everything. Avoid being alone with either of them. And let me handle the legal aspects. This has moved beyond divorce law into criminal territory. What about Patricia? She's in danger because she helped me. I'll arrange protection for her through official channels. Witness intimidation is a serious crime, and the authorities take it very seriously. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, considering how completely my understanding of the situation had changed. What I'd thought was a simple case of marital betrayal might actually be an attempted murder that failed only because I was tougher than my wife and former best friend had expected. My phone rang at midnight. Scott's number. Robert, we need to end this, tonight. End what, Scott? All of it. The divorce proceedings, the professional investigations, the harassment. It's gone too far. Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like it's just getting started. Meet me at the festival grounds. 1 hour, just you and me, no lawyers, no witnesses. We'll settle this like men. So you can finish what you started with that drunk driver? The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When Scott finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. You know, I know everything, Scott. The accident, the cover-up, the threats against Patricia. Did you really think you could murder me and get away with it? It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Kevin was just supposed to scare you, maybe cause a minor accident. He was drunk, panicked, hit you harder than planned. So you admit it. I admit we made a mistake. But Robert, we can still fix this. We can make it right. How do you make attempted murder right? Money. Lots of money. Enough to set you up for life. Enough to disappear if you want to. All you have to do is walk away from the divorce, the investigations, everything. And if I refuse, then Patricia might have an accident of her own. And next time, we won't leave anything to chance. The threat was clear, direct, and likely being recorded by law enforcement agencies Constance had already contacted. Scott had just admitted to a violent attempt and issued a threat against a witness. 1 hour, Scott. Festival grounds. Main pavilion. Come alone. You'll consider our offer? I'll give you my final answer. I hung up and immediately called Constance, who patched me through to Detective Ray Morrison of the state police. Within 30 minutes, they'd arranged surveillance, backup, and recording equipment that would capture every word of my final confrontation with the people who'd tried to destroy my life. The festival grounds were dark and empty, decorated for the weekend celebration that would bring thousands of people to our small town. I arrived early and positioned myself near the main pavilion, where concealed officers had already established surveillance positions. Scott arrived exactly on time, but he wasn't alone. Diane emerged from the passenger seat of his BMW, and both of them approached with the careful movements of people who knew they were walking into a trap. "Robert," Diane said as they stopped 10 feet away, "thank you for coming. Thank you for finally telling the truth about the accident." "We never meant for you to get hurt so badly," Scott said. "It was supposed to be minor, just enough to keep you in the hospital while we figured out how to handle the divorce. But I was tougher than you expected." "Much tougher," Diane agreed. "And smarter. We underestimated you completely. So what's your offer?" $2 million, Scott said. "Cash, untraceable, deposited in any account you specify. In exchange, you withdraw all legal proceedings, relocate to another state, and never contact any of us again." "And Patricia?" "Patricia gets to keep her job and her life, as long as she keeps her mouth shut about things that don't concern her." I pretended to consider their offer while the concealed recording equipment captured every word. $2 million is a lot of money. "It's enough to start over anywhere you want," Diane said. "New life, new identity, complete freedom from all of this." "What about justice?" "Justice?" Scott laughed harshly. "Justice is whatever people with power decide it is. We have power, connections, resources. You have a failed marriage and a body shop in a fading town." "Actually," I said, "I have something much more valuable than that." "What's that?" Diane asked. "I have the truth. And the truth is that you tried to murder your own husband because he was inconvenient to your affair." "You can't prove that," Scott said. "Actually, I can. Kevin Walsh is cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's provided details about your meetings, your payments, your instructions about my schedule and route home." The color drained from both their faces. They'd walked into a trap that was about to close around them with the finality of a steel door. "But here's what I really want you to understand," I continued, raising my voice so the concealed microphones would capture every word clearly. "You didn't just try to end me. You tried to take down the man who loved you both more than anyone else in the world. The husband who would have given you anything you asked for. The friend who would have sacrificed everything for you without hesitation." "Robert," Diane started. "You erased that man as completely as if you'd succeeded. But what you created in his place is someone you should have feared far more than the person you tried to remove." Detective Morrison and his team emerged from concealment, weapons drawn, surrounding Scott and Diane with professional efficiency. "Scott Thornton and Diane Mercer," Detective Morrison announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice." As they were handcuffed and led away, Diane looked back at me with something that might have been regret or might have been hatred. "This isn't over, Robert." "Yes, it is," I replied. "This is exactly how it ends." The festival opened 2 days later to perfect weather and record crowds. I worked the auto show booth with my crew, displaying classic cars we'd restored and talking to potential customers about the craftsmanship that goes into making something beautiful from something broken. Patricia stopped by in the afternoon, looking relaxed for the first time since I'd known her. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like waking up from a nightmare," I said. "Like getting my life back." "Any regrets?" I considered the question while watching families enjoy the festival, couples walking hand in hand, children laughing on carnival rides. I regret that it took me so long to see who they really were, I said finally, but I don't regret fighting back. Some things are worth fighting for, even if you have to fight alone. You weren't alone, Patricia said. You had people who believed in you. Yes, I did. And that made all the difference. As the sun set over the festival grounds, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness. That would come later, when the wounds had healed, and I'd learned to trust again. But peace. The quiet satisfaction of someone who'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger than before. Diane and Scott were facing 25 years to life for attempted murder. Their careers were destroyed, their reputations ruined, their futures reduced to whatever mercy the justice system might show them. They'd gambled everything on eliminating me, and they'd lost completely. I walked home through streets filled with the sounds of celebration, past houses where families were settling in for the night, secure in their love and trust for each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new possibilities for building something better from the wreckage of my former life. But tonight, I was simply grateful to be alive, awake, and finally free from people who'd tried to destroy me while I slept. The sleeping dog had awakened, and his bite had proven more devastating than anyone could have imagined. The war was over, and justice had prevailed. Sometimes, that's the best ending anyone can hope for.